Barry Odom has finally announced a starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Nick Arvin. We got a big episode of Locked On Boilermakers coming your way with multiple big stories about Purdue football. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. So let's get right into this. We've been talking about it on the show ever since we started this show up just a few weeks back. There's been a quarterback battle going on in West Lafayette, and that was seen to be between all four guys. I reported that the two frontrunners were Malachi Singleton, transfer out of Arkansas, and a guy by the name of Ryan Browne, who we saw play last year against Illinois, got some time in against Oregon, played very well against Illinois, not as great against Oregon, but following the 1-11 record last year, he transfers out to North Carolina in order to play with Bill Belichick. He doesn't end up getting the starting job in North Carolina. Barry Odom becomes the head coach at Purdue, and Ryan Browne makes his way back. So we see a big quarterback competition. That's kind of been the big storyline throughout Purdue camp all summer long, stretching out into the fall. And going back to this Saturday, we thought that we may have an answer to that quarterback battle. And while Barry Odom, while his staff wasn't necessarily prepared to give out an answer after Saturday's scrimmage, we did see this week that Ryan Browne was playing with the ones. And that was a decision that was made after that scrimmage Saturday. So we had a pretty good idea, and I brought this up a couple of shows ago, that Ryan Browne was playing with the ones, has a great connection with Armand Branch. So he was presumed to be the starter, and today we got that confirmation. Ryan Browne was named the Week 1 starter for the Purdue Boilermakers, and that may be exciting for some of you guys that saw him play against Illinois, and I've seen some feedback where there isn't as much belief. People believe that Malachi Singleton will get a spot to play at some point in the year. And I don't necessarily know if that's the case or it's not. You always hear about teams not necessarily wanting to be in these situations where you have two quarterbacks, because all it takes is for Ryan Browne to throw a couple interceptions, and then the fans want Malachi Singleton on the field. And then that creates tension between the quarterback room, and that creates tension on the team. And that's something that not a whole lot of coaches want to see. But I believe that Ryan Browne's going to do just fine. When you think about the way that Purdue's schedule is laid out this year, you have a week 1 matchup against Ball State. You have a week 2 matchup against Southern Illinois. And I agree that the margin for error for Purdue isn't as big as some other teams in those two games, because you are coming off 1-11 last year. You bring in 50 plus transfers, and it's going to take a bit for all those guys to gel together. But when you think about giving a quarterback, a redshirt sophomore like Ryan Browne is, 3 years of eligibility if you include this year, when you give him the time to kind of step in against a Ball State, against a Southern Illinois, that prepares him going into USC. He doesn't have to be blind for that offense. You give him 2 games to really plug in, get comfortable, have a good game, and we may see him be able to perform against USC and find some success in that week 3 matchup against a rebuilt defense that we talked about here on the show. That's going to be a pivotal game for this Purdue team. But when you think about Ryan Browne specifically, who he is as a player, what he's shown, we've seen that he's fit in perfectly to what Barry Odom's wanted to do. And Malachi Singleton was another guy who was another front runner alongside Browne for this job that also had similar attributes. But when you think about going into camp, we saw that Malachi Singleton was making throws. We saw that Ryan Browne was making throws, but turnovers were an issue both ways. And that was the biggest question. Who can limit these turnovers first? Because Purdue isn't going to have the margin of error to turn the ball over this year. And that's just what it is. When you have a bit of a talent gap between you and, say, a USC or, say, an Illinois, who's a dark horse to compete in the Big Ten, that's a week 5, week 6 matchup, or a Notre Dame. You have a lot of tough teams on the schedule. You don't have the margin of error. And for Purdue, not turning the ball over is going to be crucial finding success this year and playing competitive football. And we saw this week, Ryan Browne with the ones was able to fit in, was able to limit the turnovers, was able to continue making the throws and make it happen in the play action. And that's going to be the key to success for Purdue this year. Ryan Browne doesn't need to be a Jaden Mayava. He doesn't need to lead the Big Ten in passing yards. He doesn't need to be a Drew Aller. He doesn't need to be a top guy in the Big Ten because that's not what Barry Odom's asking him to do. Barry Odom is asking him to bring a level of familiarity with this offense, albeit he stepped in under Ryan Walters last year, not in the Barry Odom offense. But when you think about the success that Ryan Browne had last year against Illinois, and kind of funny, we scheduled Sunny Verma, who's talking to Illini for our next segment. Kind of funny how it worked out. We filmed that one before the announcement of the starter came out. So we'll talk that one here in our next segment. But when you think about what Ryan Browne was able to do in that Illinois game last year, when you think about, hey, this was under Ryan Walters. This was under a team that was incredibly dysfunctional. Put him in the Barry Odom offense. Obviously, Ryan Browne hasn't played with Barry Odom, hasn't played for him, rather. But when you think about training camp, when you think, hey, this dude has had a couple months to plug in, and so far, so good. He's really taken the steps these past few weeks. I don't think that Ryan Browne was a lot 2 weeks ago for the job, like a lot of people suggested. I think that Malachi Singleton was really hanging in there. But we saw this final week going down to the wire. Barry Odom said earlier last week that he didn't want this bleeding into the week one matchup with Ball State. He wanted answers to this quarterback battle, and he wanted them by this weekend. And we got the answers. Ryan Browne really stepped up. He made the plays that he needed to make, and he proved that he deserves to be the week one starter. And as Purdue fans, we need to have some pride in that. We need to support Ryan Browne. We need to have the faith in him that it's going to be a long shot. It's going to be a big task to bring this Purdue team back from where they were left last year. But Ryan Browne's a good step in the right direction. And not just the talent that he presents, not just the talent that we saw at times last year, but when you think about, he has 3 years of eligibility. This is a guy that you can build your future on for Purdue. Obviously, he leaves for North Carolina last year, but it was under different circumstances. If Ryan Browne is able to have a good year this year, if Purdue is able to string some wins together, show competitive football in a lot of these games, there's a good chance that Ryan Browne is a foundational piece to build this program on for the next 3 years. I'm not saying he's going to be Aiden O'Connell. I'm not going to say he's going to have that amount of success at Purdue, but when you think about a guy who has talent to plug in, who has talent to be the foundation of this new era, the Barry Odom era, I look at Ryan Browne. I'm not saying Malachi Singleton doesn't have the talent, because he definitely does. And if he doesn't find it at Purdue, I'm sure that he'll have a starting job, some other Power 5 program in the nation coming through to next year. But Malachi Singleton's going to be just fine. However, I think that the announcement today, I think that the overall consensus of this staff that has loved what they saw from Ryan Browne, minus some turnover issues earlier in camp, I think that Ryan Browne's proven himself that he can be a capable quarterback going into Big Ten play, going into these meaningful games in September, October, November. Whether Ryan Browne steps up, turns heads, and really proves everyone wrong, that's going to have to be seen. We're going to have to see that on the field. We're going to have to see how he plugs into that offense. And overall, it's pretty early to project how a guy who hasn't really seen the field all that much is going to play. But he has potential. He has trust in his coaching staff. The staff trusts him more than about anybody else on the team. He's proven himself. He's proven himself that he deserves to be the starter. He's proven himself that he deserves to lead this team week one against Ball State. Whether Singleton gets a chance, that's up to Ryan Browne. I think that if Ryan Browne steps in against Ball State, delivers, really wins in meaningful fashion, is able to stay within what Barry Odom wants to do, make high IQ plays, and keep the ball. Don't turn the ball over. That's going to be the biggest key for Purdue. It's going to be the biggest key for whoever's at quarterback for Purdue. Do not turn the ball over. Turnovers are going to kill the Boilermakers this year, and Ryan Browne needs to prove that he's able to keep the ball in possession with Purdue. I think he's going to be able to. He's really shown that he has potential to lead this team, to be the starter for this team. And I'll be interested to see how he plays week 1 against Ball State. Here in our next segment, we talk to a guy, Sunny Verma, who talks Illini on the Locked On Network for Locked On Illinois. We'll talk to him about that week 6 matchup against Illinois, and we'll have that for you here next. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Maybe Jalen Hurts is a surprise in there. Joe Burrow, who's looking to get his Bengals back on track. Patrick Mahomes asserts himself as the face of the league. Or maybe take a flyer in August about who's going to be that Super Bowl champion. Maybe the Chiefs come back or the Eagles repeat with the FanDuel app today. You can make those bets. So start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. So FanDuel, play your game. Day 5 of the 12 analysts till kickoff continues on here today on Locked On Boilermakers. We've got the host of Talk Illini, Locked On Illinois. We got Sunny Verma here on the show. How are you doing, Sunny? And thank you for joining us here on Locked On Boilermakers.
You know, we got football right around the corner. So as an Illini fan, you know, we have a lot to be excited about, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in this segment. But, you know, it's just fun. I'm trying to enjoy the moment, right? The summer is now over. It's fall. You know, the NFL is playing their preseason games. We've all been following along with the training camps of our favorite college football teams. I've said my proper farewell to summer and bring on football season.
Right. Bring it on. And let's just get right to the point. Last year, this Purdue and Illinois game was electric. Absolute fireworks in that one. We saw a freshman quarterback in Ryan Browne kind of step up for Purdue and really make that a competitive football game. That's something that we didn't see a whole lot last year for Purdue. Going into this football season, going into this game this year, week 6, I believe, for Purdue, I expect it to be a fun game. Obviously, Illinois is much improved. Kind of tell me about Illinois, where they want to be, and how that team has improved since Purdue fans have seen them last year.
So, Nick, this is kind of surreal for me. You know, I've watched Illini football for 25 plus years-ish. And there's never been this sense of energy, this sense of optimism and positive, talk from the national people. Look, Illini fans, you know, as every fan base does, they'll delude themselves into thinking, hey, this is a great football team that can potentially win the Big Ten or win 10 games. But in reality, we know it's just kind of fan delusion. Right now, I'm in the aspect where I was in Las Vegas, right, a couple of weeks for the Big Ten media days. And, you know, I was talking to the Kings of the North and a lot of the big podcasts out there, the Nebraska podcast. The conversations they're telling me is like, yeah, we think Illinois can win 10 games. We think Illinois can win 11 games. Now, in years past, if any Illini fan would say that, you know, we'd be teasing them, calling them a homer and whatnot. And now me being the homer, I'm getting nervous at the idea that, you know, these sort of expectations are out there. Now, a sponsor of our show, FanDuel, has the over-under at 8.5. And quite honestly, I think that's just about right. When you look at the schedule, you can come on either side. You know, it looks easy in the sense that you're not playing Oregon, you're not playing Penn State, you're not playing Michigan. But it's also, you can constitute it as being hard because you are playing Ohio State. You are going to be playing teams that should be good. I think Washington is very underrated right now. So we'll be traveling to Washington. You're going to have USC, who sure has struggled a little bit in the Big Ten, but their recruiting classes are always one of the best in the country. And Lincoln Riley, even though he seems to be struggling with the X's and O's parts, he can put together a really talented roster. Indiana, week 4 in Bloomington. I think that's a game that's going to be one of the premier games of the entire Big Ten Conference schedule this year. So it's one of those where, Illinois is not playing a bunch of the A-plus teams in the Big Ten, but they are playing a lot of the A-minus teams. And so this Illinois team that's returning 16 starters of 22, they won 10 games last year. Luke Altmyer, senior quarterback. I always say on my show, like having a senior year quarterback who's now going to be in his third year in the system, same offensive coordinator, same head coach all 3 years. That's kind of like a cheat code in modern college sports. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And for now, I choose to be optimistic, but I'm going to be a little cautious with it.
Absolutely. Illinois is one of those teams that I look at, even as a Purdue fan. I know kind of what the expectations are for Purdue and that there is a ceiling that is kind of low-ish. Just that's the reality of it. First year head coach. But Illinois is kind of in an opposite situation. This is the year for Illinois where it's kind of you want to win now because this is kind of where that window is with Altmyer. He's a senior now. And that team's really together. You return all those starters. So we see the difference between Illinois and Purdue, where both of those teams are at. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about that matchup, when you talk about week 6, I labeled that game as one of the 3 biggest games for Purdue this year, just because we saw the explosiveness of that game last year, 49-50 in overtime. That's exciting. That's what fans want to see from a Purdue fan perspective. You want to see close and competitive games this year. Purdue has really put a focus on so far in training camp, whether that's with Barry Odom, he tries to bring in a run the ball philosophy. He wants to focus on that. And when you have a senior running back like Devin Mockabee, it makes that philosophy possible. So my question for you, Sunny, is how does Illinois kind of stack up against the run? What kind of guys have they brought in, whether that's via the portal, whether it's younger guys that have kind of grown up? How will Illinois be able to stop the running attack of Devin Mockabee and of the Boilermakers?
That's going to be one of the biggest questions for the Illini football team in general. It's funny, right before we started recording, I literally just finished recording the defensive lineman preview for my show, Locked On Illini. And we have a lot of new faces to the Illini, but not necessarily new faces to the Big Ten Conference in general. James Thompson Jr. from Wisconsin is the marquee guy that we added to our line this past season. We also brought in Curtis Neal, also a Wisconsin Badger. He's planning on starting. I think he's going to be the starting nose tackle on this team. What I said on my show was, I think it's the biggest question mark on this Illini football team, but it also has the greatest opportunity. Just because a lot of these guys, while they might be new to the Illini, they're not new to the Big Ten Conference. And so, when Michigan runs the ball 40 times, or when Purdue tries to run the ball 35 plus times, this is not something where they're going to be gassed or they're going to be tired. They've felt this before. They understand what this is before. They've got a lot of young talent as well. Guys like Pat Farrell, who's going to be a redshirt sophomore this year, who might at this point just win his a job on the defensive line. But I think it's going to go based on what these new former Badgers are going to play like. If they step it up, if James Thompson Jr. ends up being an all Big Ten guy, like I genuinely think he's going to be, then what I just talked about a couple of minutes ago, about these aspirations of winning 10 games, that all of a sudden becomes more realistic, because I think the defensive line and maybe arguably the wide receiver room are the 2 rooms right now that are the most questionable.
Yeah, and for Purdue, when you talk about the defensive side of the ball, linebackers is something that's always been pretty strong for Purdue over the years. And it's something that when you bring in a guy like Tennessee State transfer Sanders Ellis, he's really broken out, shown himself as a leader of that defense so far in training camp. But somewhere else on the field that Barry Odom has really looked to solidify are those DBs. He brings in 6 or 7 guys in the transfer portal for what was over a 50 guy. 50 new guys are coming on this roster. You put in 6 or 7 on the DB. So that's something that Odom's been trying to patch up with a senior quarterback like Luke Altmyer. Do you think that Illinois is going to try to stretch the ball down the field, kind of take advantage of a DB room that really hasn't played together yet, hasn't seen much cohesiveness? What do you expect Illinois to do on the offensive side of the ball? And how do you expect them to kind of take over that game in Ross-Ade?
So we just got finished talking about the defensive line, where I talked about being the biggest question mark on the defensive side. On the offensive side, it's the wide receiver room, but not because of a lack of talent. In fact, there's a lot of talent in that room. It's just that they're replacing 4 guys, Nick, that have gone on to the NFL in the past 2 years. You bring in Hudson Clement, Western Virginia's best wide receiver last year. And I don't know about you, but for me, whenever we get a transfer in, I always like to take a look at the opposing team's fan bases and the message boards and see how upset that they are when a person leaves. And the Mountaineers fans were not happy that Hudson Clement decided to leave. And so that made me happy, more optimistic about what kind of role he can play for our team this year. But then you have guys like Colin Dixon. Malik Elzy is a former 4-star who was a huge recruiting victory for Brett Bielema when he took this Illinois job, because he was the top recruit in the state. He was new to the job. We weren't sure if we would be able to land him. We did. He hasn't shown much in his first 2 years, only 9 catches, but the kid is super talented. Alex Kapka-Jones, my flag player for this upcoming season is Justin Bowick. And by flag player, I mean, I like to plant my flag on a guy who I think people are not paying enough attention to. And I think Justin he's like 6'4", 200. I think he's going to be the perfect target for Luke Altmyer when it comes to, the red zone. And as you said, if your DBs are inexperienced or if it's a weak spot, I think Illinois has the numbers when it comes to the talent that they can throw out at the wide receiver spot. And we've got a decent offensive line. And as I mentioned earlier, most importantly, we have that senior quarterback. And I think that's going to be huge.
Great, Sonny. So we talk about what these teams are going to look like going into the season. Obviously, for Purdue especially, we're going to see some changes kind of in the depth chart as that team tries to work some stuff out. Illinois, obviously, a little bit more ready for the moment now. But I ask everyone that's been on the show, we're doing this little segment, what your projections are for Illinois for the record going into this year. I've talked about, hey, I think Purdue can pull out 6 wins, maybe. That's kind of what fans are hoping for. Maybe a bowl game, sneak it out at 6 games. Sonny, what do you expect Illinois to do this year? What do you expect their record to be, and where do you expect them to go?
I'm not trying to cop out, but I've decided I'm going to do my game-by-game episode during the week of the season, like a couple days before. So it's just because I'm trying to understand, right? Like, I'm soaking in all the knowledge, all the previews as I can. Right now, I will tell you, it could be anywhere from 8 to 10. If it goes a little under that, and which is incredible that I'm hearing myself talk about this. Like, if you told any Illini fan that, hey, you're going to win 8 games and be disappointed, I would not fathom that idea in the past, but that just gives all the credit to Brett Bielema and the program that he's building in Champaign. So I don't have a definite number yet because, quite honestly, I haven't decided yet. But I would say anywhere from 8 to 10 could be plausible. Again, you're not going to beat Ohio State, even if you're playing them at home. But you know what? Last year we had the defending champions at home, the Michigan Wolverines, and Illinois did win. So really, who knows?
All right, great, Sonny. Thank you again for joining us here today on Locked On Boilermakers. I'm sure we'll talk again before that Week 6 matchup against Illinois. It's always great to have you on the show. Thank you, man.
Thanks, Nick.
Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer because over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. It's always a pleasure to talk to Sunny Verma. Thank you for coming on the show and talking Illini. That matchup will certainly be fireworks this year. Hopefully, Ryan Browne can run back the performance that he had last year against Illinois. For this last segment, I want to talk about some news that broke right before I started filming this episode, and that's about the SEC. We talked about it on the show. We talked about it in our Big Ten squad show yesterday, funny enough, about the SEC. The SEC predominantly, historically, has had to schedule, not only, but they've scheduled 4 non-conference opponents. And those non-conference opponents didn't have to be power programs. They could be FCS programs. They could be low major programs. It didn't matter. The SEC could schedule whoever. And when you look at the college football playoff at the end of the year, when you look at a 9-3 team, if you put up a 9-3 SEC team and you put up a 9-3 Big Ten team, the SEC team is going to go above the Big Ten team. And that's just how it is. There is an SEC bias in the college football playoff committee. And that's just kind of how it has to be. I don't agree with it, but we've seen SEC bias is a real thing. When picking teams over with similar resumes, the SEC gets a leg up over the Big Ten. And when you consider the fact that the SEC can play 4 meaningless games a year and the Big Ten only has 3 games to pick, it's a joke because the SEC plays an easier schedule out of conference and they get the prejudice. They get to be picked over the Big Ten come playoff time. And that's absolutely unfair to the Big Ten. So we've seen Big Ten coaches, they've taken a stand. They say, hey, if we're going to be held to this standard and you guys are going to be picked over us by this committee, there needs to be changes made. You guys need to play meaningful games out of conference. And today we finally got answers because the SEC and the College Football Playoff Committee, the scheduling committee for the NCAA, they announced that the SEC will be adopting a 3 out of conference game format. In 2026, you're going to have to start scheduling 9 conference games where only 3 of those games can be out of conference. And the even bigger kicker is that one of those out of conference games has to be against a high ranking opponent, against a Power 4 team or Notre Dame. That's going to be a competitive matchup, and that's going to increase the intensity of the SEC schedule. So now we see they adopt a similar format that the Big Ten has. The Big Ten and the SEC are now going to be on the same playing field when it comes to scheduling, when it comes to playing these out of conference games. And obviously, come playoff time, the SEC is still going to have a leg up. But when you add on an extra game, also, when you think about it, this could be a Big Ten SEC matchup. This could create a big time primetime game that could have serious implications on the college football race, because you could find yourself a 9-3 Big Ten team that could shift, whether that be to 10-2 or to 8-4, depending on what the win or loss ratio is of this competitive game against an SEC team. And that's something that kind of needs to be talked about, because for the longest time, the Big Ten has had a distinct disadvantage when you think about scheduling and how that correlates into the playoff race. And we finally have answers. We finally have a chance to kind of see if there are any changes. We'll have an opportunity to see if the Big Ten kind of has a better chance to get into the playoffs now. And I expect that the Big Ten will field more teams now that the SEC is playing another competitive game. I expect that the Big Ten will kind of take the place, one of those Big Ten teams that we see. This conference has become a lot more complete in recent years. Traditionally, the Big Ten has had times where it's been kind of top heavy with a Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan towards the top, and then not a ton of great teams in the middle. That's kind of shifted for the Big Ten lately. There have been an increase in teams that are good, a more complete conference, a more complete football conference specifically. And that's going to directly affect the college football race. When you think about the SEC, they got to play more meaningful games now. The Big Ten is used to playing that schedule. There's going to be no change for the Big Ten. They've been playing that hard schedule with only 3 out of conference games. We see an adjustment being made, and that's great. It's great to see the SEC finally being put in their place. It's good to see the SEC finally having to play the same schedule that everyone else does, and it's good to see the SEC favoritism finally goes away for once. Obviously, the favoritism is there, but finally a decision is made in favor of the good guys, in favor of the Big Ten. I don't see Purdue making the college football playoff this year, but once Barry Odom gets this team back on track, once Barry Odom rebuilds this program, once Ryan Browne takes this program to the next level, Purdue will be right in those conversations. I'm just kidding. Obviously, we have a big season to go, a pivotal season at that, and there's going to be a lot decided by what Ryan Browne does this year, by what Barry Odom does this year, and overall how these Boilermakers are able to play as a team. So thank you guys once again for joining us. I'm so excited about this breaking news. We finally have a starter announced. Thank you guys for making the Locked On Boilermakers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show with our guy, Brian Smith. He has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings, so be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys again for joining us today on Locked On Boilermakers. Hope you all have a great Friday, and as always, Boiler up, hammer down.